Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Small Business Success Talk, where we spotlight small businesses, share their best practices, give you great advice from the advice they've received, and we talk about what success really means to everybody. This episode is going to be up there with one of my favorites because of the content, and to meet new people is always one of my favorite things to do, to get their stories. And I love this guest, as I do all of them. I'm super excited. Again, I think I say super excited like every single episode. I just want you to be super excited to listen to this episode. I do want to have a quick shout out to my sponsor partner, which is the Chamber of St. Matthews. If you are not involved in your local chamber, you're missing out because there's already a group of people ready for you to join right in, to do great business, to learn from each other, find your peer set, find your tribe. Go start with your local chamber. Chamber of St. Matthews is my local tribe here, and I'm very proud of us. We've grown a lot and we are thriving, and we have done that by formulating a very specific kind of culture in which we have a lot of fun with what we do. We love what we do as our professions and careers and businesses, and we take what we do seriously. But ourselves within all that, not so much. And that makes for a great day. Like, we have fun with each other. And I love to see our sub tribes starting to formulate within the chamber itself. So go find your tribe at your area chamber. If you don't have one, connect with me. I'd love to get you plugged in at the Chamber of St. Matthews, based here in the Louisville, Kentucky area. But we cover a lot of grounds around here. We have 1,400 plus members, so from all over the place. And I just love it. I love that we're thriving and vital part of the community. It's fantastic. With all that being said, my guest today, I recently just met at a conference. And when he sat down at the table, you do your highs and howdies and, get to know, what do you do? What do you do? Well, at this conference, it was the National Speaker Association Influence Conference. They have it every year. It's the big conference. And he and I, it was our first time at this event, new members to the association, first influence event. And we're like, what are you hoping to get out of it? He's like, I need to know how to break in and get started. And, same for me. I tend to, my approach is I just create the thing and run with it, like starting a podcast or, another podcast, or somebody told me I needed to write a book and I wrote a book. Like, I just do the things without thinking I need somebody else's permission to do the thing. They just, out of necessity, I've done the things. I don't know. That's a whole different conversation. So when I met Christopher Goff sitting right next to me, he said, yeah, I had, background in corporate, but now I do sales compensation consulting and training. I was like, what? That was so interesting to me. Like, I had not met anybody who focuses specifically on how to develop your sales compensation plan and how to really set up your business to bring in a business development person or an account manager or a salesperson, like whatever title that you want to give them. How do I, as the business owner, set my business up for success for that and the salesperson? And so just knowing that he existed, I was like, this is fantastic. I need to have you as a guest. And he's like, sure. For what? So I told him about the show and he was happy to oblige. His background is in finance. He's got a master's degree. He's got economics, and we touched a little bit on his background. He comes also from an IT healthcare background. So the mix of his background into what he's doing now is also very fascinating for me. I've loved our conversation. I'm looking forward to continuing to get to know him. And we do talk about his book. His book is, the title of his book is Starting Simple Sales Compensation. And I just, so far, I've started the book. I'm not completely through it. So as a caveat, disclaimer, caveat, whatever you want to say, I love how it started. And I've already dove into, going back to say, you know what, I need to actually work this book, not just read the book. That's how good I think it is. And I'm only about 50 pages into it. So I would highly recommend it because it's going to be that helpful if you are in this space. But I don't want to take up this whole time. I want you to get to know Christopher Goff yourself as my guest on this episode of Small Business Success Talk. So, Christopher, thank you so much for being a guest on this show. You and I just actually met recently at the National Speaker Association Influence Conference. And I can't remember what session we sat beside each other. Well, that says a lot about the session, doesn't it?
Seems like I think it was like a Saturday.
It was
might have been
one.
Yes, it was like either for that Friday afternoon. It was probably like the very first one. That's probably what it was.
One. And right off the bat, I loved what you said you were doing. And so I wanted to get to know you. And I'm very glad that I have you on here because we're going to get to the book in a bit. But I really want to know more about you and what you to share with your audience because you have a mix of a background. So not just say like you come from an interesting background to get to the subject that we're going to talk about. So tell me your background.
It's an interesting thing to figure out where to start. So let me talk about let's call it work type of stuff, right? And rather than it was a sunny Tuesday morning type of thing, right?
Yes.
My background comes from sort of growing up in sales operations for a healthcare IT company. And in that time, there was a lot of the on-the-job training associated with supporting an organization. In this case, it was like territories and quotas and a lot of the analytic type of work. And what I was responsible for was sales incentive plans during that whole period of time, of which, I didn't necessarily understand what I was doing, but I was tasked with doing it. And over time, I kind of grew an appreciation for what that actually mean, right? Like that, what it is that is on the other side of that is an impact to people's livelihood, right? Mm-hmm. That what decisions we make matter because it has an impact to other people's lives. And over time, what I picked up on is, let's call it more of the academic understanding. And so I moved into broad-based compensation as well. And so I had an idea of like what the business part is for sales, supporting an organization, the math behind it, and how to move people, right? Like people respond to incentives. Then I picked up more of the rest of the story, the holistic component, which included base salaries, included an appreciation more for the job description and the roles and responsibilities that are documented, that really sit behind what the business requires, right? And so my background over the last many years has been broader international exposure for compensation, the rest of the holistic viewpoint of compensation, and really aligning to the sales function. So that's kind of how it evolved over, well, I guess about 15 years of supporting mostly healthcare and technology companies.
Because for me, that was the fascinating part, is that you're coming from that with this sales piece attached to that knowledge base. Is like that I would never, I would never have thought about it, but it does happen. Like there are people out there like you, but there
are some crazies. Yes.
Well, definitely some interesting folk that can walk both those lines. Like,
yeah.
How does that work?
I do like to say sort of bridge HR and sales, right? Because I can speak both languages, right? And I have an appreciation coming from the business of what do we need to do, right? What do we need to accomplish in order to go and get to a better place in terms of revenue or profit, right? And then I think about what kind of job was that look like? What kind of incentive structure is necessary in order to go and do what the business needs to like make happen? So I have an appreciation for that. And I think a few years of doing direct sales myself has helped give me a particular sentiment on that. that I think might be a little different. Like, yeah, I sold stuff, right? I sold candles, and I've sold a variety of other things. And I think that helps give me a little bit of a perspective of how do people best respond to different designs and different components to get to the best, ultimate, outcome.
So what got you into all of this in the first place? Did you just like get it thrown on you and you're like, hey, I kind of like this? Or did you walk into healthcare technology going, I really like this stuff, like already? Like
Yeah.
how'd you get there?
Now, I have a master's degree in economics, and I thought I was going to go into more public policy. I went and worked for the state of North Carolina, as a statistician for a hot minute, realizing that was not a thing that I wanted
Wait,
to do.
is that a technical term? Like a hot minute? I mean, I
Yes,
know how
exactly.
long
It
that
is.
is. I know
Right.
what that is.
2 weeks in, I knew that that's not a place I wanted to be. So then it took me many months to find a job. But it was, a lot of it was, I always think it's valuable to find jobs that you don't like. It's a good thing to get that out of the way, so you learn what it is that you do not want to do. And being a statistician was a thing that I did not want to do, but it took me needing, like, when you first graduate, you're like, I will take any job because I just want to make money, right? Like,
Sure.
that's
Yes.
part of it, right?
And when we start business, the answer is yes. We'll figure it out later.
Right.
Yes.
So I figured out pretty quickly, at least I learned things in this process, so that's good, right? You learn things, you move on. And so
Just like any new relationship, you figure out early.
Yeah, we check that box.
Yeah.
On to the next one. And so in that case, I happened to go and find a position that was a just business analyst. So it was really just like working with data. And in this case, a lot of it was managing territories. So taking market data, figuring out the territory lines for their sales organization based on the market data. And so it was a fair amount of basic stuff, like working with Access and Excel, which was cool, right? And so the thing is, 3 months into the job, the guy who hired me left to do something different. And so I was like, all of a sudden, the guy.
Oh.
So there was a fair amount of like the learning how to do things without any instruction manual. And so it worked, but it was not a thing where it was like, yeah, this makes sense. This is the thing I ought to do. It fits in a interesting sort of way in that, like, economics, right? That sort of study of incentive structures, that works, right? It was congruent. It just was not in the sort of like straight path at all. So that's how I landed there. I just, got a job and learned how to do it along the way.
So master in economics, you can now walk that line between technology and HR and sales. So if you were to like describe what your personality is, how would you describe that?
That's a good question. Well, I'm gonna be a little biased because like it's me, and I'm gonna talk about myself. But I have to say probably there's a certain openness to alternative methods. So I tend to think in a little bit of a contrarian sort of way, because I look at things differently than I think most people do. I have a tendency to be thinking about what are the underlying motivations? What is the rest of the story as to why people do what they do or think the way they think? And I think that personally helps me because there's less judgment associated with this sort of like an interpretation of a specific scenario. I kind of think about it as that makes sense to me, right? Rather than that's good or bad. No, it just like, I understand. So I think that helps me in the type of job and type of work that I do, because it's something where you have to remove a little bit of the emotion of people's pay, right? You'll see people that make considerable amounts of money, and that's okay because it just is. And being, let's say, emotionally removed at least a little bit from those sorts of significant, impactful types of decisions, which in this case, right, because I had commission administration responsibilities, I had all compensation programs globally for the healthcare IT company where I'm with 10,000 employees, is a multi-billion-dollar company. So I saw plenty of things that I would say some people just cannot handle, right? The knowledge associated with what people make, that type of thing. So lots of exposure to sensitive data, which is, just part of the package deal to a certain extent.
I've had another guest on before who works with personality and human behavior assessments. And so we've talked about like the inner workings of somebody and how they apply that to their business and how that comes out differently. You are interesting to me because you've got such a detailed background, but you have a great forward facing, very welcoming, and like you said, non-judgmental, like very curious personality that's coming out. Like you don't strike me as somebody who's just going to go curl up in a ball and read the book all day. You actually want to get in with other people. This is the HR side of you who are like, yeah, I want to get to know you. And like, this is how we hit it off at the table, because if you could handle somebody like me with your background, that's an interesting person. So,
I do. And I like the social. I definitely like to interact with other human beings. I think that's a thing that I prefer that rather than the going off and doing something on my own.
Nice.
Which I think sometimes if like actually have to get stuff done, that's a little bit of a challenge.
Honestly, that's been my whole week this week. Okay. So you have, so back to how we met, you were at the Speaker Association. Mm-hmm. So your business now includes a speaking business, which you have a book.
I do have a book.
Yes. And I have started reading it. And I like I mentioned in the green room, I call it the green room, before we hit the record button, it's the proverbial green room.
Yeah.
Your book is Starting Simple: Sales Compensation. And I love that it starts with culture matters. I am such a strategy person, and part of strategy is understanding your people and what's the point? Like, what are we really here to do in the world? Let's start with that. And then the planning comes next. Mm-hmm. I'm all about that piece. So when you did that, I was like, oh, this is going to be great. And then the next chapter is know your numbers. And I was like, damn, I don't know my numbers like I should.
Have to. So far, I'm not liking this. It's funny. I had an advanced reader who said, it's great that you put it there. And I had culture as chapter 2. He said, put it to the front. Mm-hmm. He said, put it in the front. And the reason I had sort of the math first, because I was like, if people don't do their math, then they might not should hire somebody, right? Like that should be a thing where it's like, hey, let's check the box first of, did you do your math to know that you ought to bring a body into this world, right? Like you need to make sure that this is not a thing where you throw somebody in, just be like, I wanted a salesperson. I don't know how to pay them and I don't know what they're going to do, but we brought them.
Pretty much what 90% of people do.
And I tend to think that that's probably the case, right? It's like, yeah, we should grow through sales. Well, yeah, but let's make sure that you can afford to pay the person so that you don't bring somebody on and then like completely just like go off the rails. But the important part of the culture was taking the time to line up, like stack up the deck in the right way and go ahead and spend the time to do it. So it's super important, but it's also just one of those many components of making sure you're off in the right foot.
Well, I like, there's a few things that I've highlighted in this particular chapter. A team that doesn't know how to perform against a true north of company values, attitudes, and priorities will not scale effectively. That's why culture is an important factor in hiring for the sales role within an organization. I was like, hell yeah, that's so true. That's why I highlighted. And then I was like, be sure to bring on a salesperson that is aligned with your culture. Otherwise, the customer experience will suffer along with your financial performance. Mm-hmm. And I have seen that in my own worlds, my own career, time after time after time after time, because there was such a disconnect between what the company wanted to be in the world and what the salesperson was out pushing.
Right. Right.
And I've experienced that salesperson trying to push me into something. And I was like, this is not even close. And it was just, so to have the culture first, I love to go right into the numbers is the first how to, like, you need to make sure this is solid. So I love the organization of where this is going already. I did kind of skim to the back and saw that you had some example job titles in here too. I was
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, good. A place to get started. But like, and you have said very clearly in here, it's individual to your company's needs.
Right.
But this gives you it gives me a great template to get started, but I know I'm going to have to tweak it according to, and it's like, damn, I wish I really had this when I was working with the client before. So can I tell you a story and then you work it out with me?
Yeah.
I had a client and I was trying to do my best to help them understand. They hired me to be the interviewer, not the decision maker, just the interviewer, so that the get filtered faster to the CEO. And I did, and it was fine. Well, he give me somebody specific that had been in their background and in their industry, and he really wanted her to be that business development person. And so we get there, and I'm looking at your templates, and you have market competitiveness section in it. And I was like, base salary, target incentive. And this base salary that you have listed here for this particular thing is, 64,000, which it's going to fluctuate, I'm sure, depending on the year that you're looking at this. And I was like, oh, I got to tell him this example. So when I interviewed her, got to know her, she was absolutely perfect for the position. I could see why he would want her. I was like, yes. And then I had to ask about where she would, where her goals are and what she wants to accomplish. And I got out of her magically what she was regularly making. Right. So I'm like, oh, okay. I know what her desired range of income is.
Yeah.
And that desired range of income was in six figures. And he wanted to offer her a base of 45,000. So who's off?
Well, it all depends on the particulars of the market. So in this case, it's probably him, right? It's probably true. And some of the rest of the book kind of goes into, let's say, adapting or coping with being off, right? From that of the what is a driver in the marketplace. But a lot of it is specific to the type of job, right? Very, very, very explicitly, but also the market segment. So in this case, like the type of job can be, account based versus net new business, right? And you need to look at the mix of what incentives, variable pay, and what guaranteed pay look like for each of those types of roles. But there's also something that might be specific to your business segment. So like if you're in transportation versus education versus professional services or consulting, or all of those things have different mixes and different total target compensation. And so in this case, it's probably likely that if she is of a certain caliber of what she currently makes, part of what goes along with that is an understanding of, well, what is the guaranteed pay that you currently are at? And what is the variable component? So if that's commissions or a bonus plan or whatever, right? Has she been on a very rich bonus plan for a very long time because she grew up the business? And so it's just been part of like an ongoing, book, right? That she gets revenue, like a commission rate on revenue as an example, right?
Right.
And so there's probably more to the story that would help sort of dissect it, a little bit clearer to know whether or not you can actually bridge that gap. Now, if we're talking he wants to pay 45 and she's making 120 base, that dog probably won't hunt, right? That it's just part of the, okay, so think about what exactly is it that's the rest of her comp as well, because what might be the case is that she has a really solid book of business and they only pay her like 20 grand in commissions or something like that, because she's built this book, and the mix is something like 80% base and 20% variable or something like that, right? And in this case, he needs to bring her on board to be more hungry, which means you gotta go and figure out, okay, well, maybe you can offer substantively more in commissions more frequently than what she currently gets, which she might be comfortable offsetting a little bit based on the shift in job, because it might be more interesting, it might be more purposeful, which goes back to the culture as well. Is like, maybe there's work, because she's interviewing, right? Maybe there's work that is being done here which might speak to her, just like when people go to nonprofits, right? The reason they go there is not for money, right? It's for a reinforcement of purpose, or the alignment to values, or just less chaos, you know what I mean, associated with potentially private sector work effort, and any combination therein. So to answer your question, it all depends. I would need to know a little bit more to give that, but more likely than not, if the person is spectacular, you're gonna have to figure out a way to pay them for it.
Boy, that'd be so nice if we were on the receiving end of spectacular. And as a salesperson, I also think this book would help a salesperson.
Yeah.
In the sense of, okay, this is how they're making that decision. What do I need to be asking when going in to learn those decisions?
Go on. I'm intrigued by that. So is your sentiment there of negotiating, essentially like negotiating for the best sales incentive plan type of thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Because again, back to starting with culture matters. If they know that as a salesperson, if I go in and if I'm incentivized by money only, and I'm walking into a company who is culture facing forward, there's going to be a disconnect in like, what questions do I need to ask to get myself out of this dance faster? Like if I know that they're going to be all this, then I'm probably walking into a lower base, higher variable, versus the other way around. Like, I need money like this, and I want a limitless possibility. Right. So, knowing what kind of thing they're walking into and how to ask those questions for themselves, it could go both ways. But definitely this book, like, you need to be working with small to medium businesses who regularly need to hire salespeople. Right.
The value of the book definitely comes from, and you kind of touched on it, is that a sales incentives plan, in order for it to be effective, needs to be individualized, and it needs to be specific to that strategy for that organization at that moment in time as well. And it's something that, this is a job that you have, right? And you're going and pursuing a very specific objective as the strategy of the organization is aligned to it. And the incentives reinforce the positive aspects of the work effort. And when the strategy changes, when the business evolves, what we need to do is make sure that the incentives then also evolve at the same time, right? And this is in order for the organization to ensure that you're paying for what you think you're paying for, right? And so that there's a shot of true sustainability, right? Over time, because we are aligning the appropriate incentives for the right behaviors, for the best outcomes, then we know financially that it pays for itself, and we all sort of grow and evolve and get better together, which is the best outcome for a good incentive program.
I would think this would also be good for those sales managers, like you just said. If everything's evolving, how do I get back to basics? How do I review myself? How do I evolve with this without losing the integrity of what we've already started?
Yeah.
So I mean, this is going to be great for all kinds of people.
Well, and interestingly enough, in the next couple of weeks, we'll be launching a workbook a companion
Ooh.
workbook to go along with that, with the intent of it being something that will be a little bit easier for that sales leader or that entrepreneur, that founder, to be able to walk through these steps. So like on the culture chapter, we're going to talk about values and purpose and mission and make sure that that's done before we then move on to the math, right? And work through the unique dynamics of what it is that you can afford and that sort of reinforced business plan.
Nice. Okay. So, Christopher,
Yes.
you got to this place. We need to know more detail. We'll make this last little segment a little faster. But typically when I talk to my guests, there's always been some sort of influence that helped get them there. And of course, you and I just got back from the speaker conference called Influence.
Yes.
So, who have been some of your biggest influencers in your life and career?
Um, I spent a fair amount of time focusing on personal development, and I have lots of folks that I've listened to over the years, and lots of heavy hitters and folks that have sort of pushed you. Like I don't know, you have like the Grant Cardones and various other folks who really like you're a hustling, right? And then I have the so like John Maxwell's and even a Gary Vaynerchuk type of
Yep.
personality that you appreciate the evolution of thought and the guidance associated with that. And what has been more influential as of late, and this is probably like the last year and a half or so, was far more mindfulness and the need to come to a little bit of personal peace in all of this, and sort of remove a little bit of the hustle. And not that a hustle is a bad thing. It's more of the constant perfectionism and the side effects of having to cope or live with never being good enough, regardless of how many amazing things that you accomplish in your life.
Operating my mind.
Right. And so I think people with high potential, like people that are that are there,
Mhm.
they struggle with this, and this is something that is more new for me, of really like dealing with it. And so I have a handful of, and I'll be hard pressed to like give specific names of the books, but Dr. Wayne Dyer is one as of recent, and also Peter Fernando's Finding Peace in Illness is one that has spoken to me. But so there's actually a fair amount of, I would say, more Buddhist sentiments that have evolved of kind of coming to a little bit of peace with existence. And funny enough, I feel like I'm actually far more productive than I ever have been on accomplishing things after working through some of the, I would say, what the stories that I've created in my mind of the never quite being good enough. So it's a funny paradox that I think has evolved. Now, interestingly enough, the story in the book came from right after COVID. I spent a lot of time networking with people, and because the craving for human interaction of some kind was a thing, that
Go figure.
was a thing, right? That I felt compelled to do. And so I spent a lot of time getting on the phone and getting on Zoom and talking to folks. And I happened to be introduced to somebody who needed to hire a salesperson, and it was a nonprofit. And George, who's the founder or co-founder of that nonprofit, needed to hire a couple salespeople. And so we went through this whole process of me trying to figure out what exactly are all of those components, which is then the basis for the book. It was me learning about what is really my underlying philosophical approach, which is very different from that of the working for companies, uh, where you have essentially a certain amount of assumed places to start, right?
Mhm.
You're working within this realm and so you don't necessarily apply it fully creatively. And so that gave me the reason and the impetus really for the book. And so now with the book out, a lot of what I'm focused on is the learning to talk pretty. So I'm that's what NSA is for, right? That's like I gotta craft my story. I gotta be able to be engaging in a way that where people would care to listen, right? And then sell that. So that's what I'm working on learning now.
Learn to talk pretty. Yeah, actually,
Exactly.
I just need to be a lot more concise so I can quit rambling so much. But that's why I started a podcast. It's supposed to help me.
Mm.
Um, so what is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Ah, ooh, that's a tough one. I I am not sure. I would have to say that the most meaningful thing that I can think of actually is probably from my acupuncturist, who I've only been going to him since September of this past year, but he's been extremely helpful in doing I don't even know what. That's the thing, right? Like it's
Whatever he's doing, it's working.
exactly, like whatever he's doing, it seems to be working, right? But it's the biggest thing that I'd say is the takeaway from our sort of sessions was to pay attention to what pisses your body off, and that's kind of the way he uses it.
Ah,
That when it all boils down to it, it's like have awareness of your decisions and sort of like progress forward with that, like the consciousness or the awareness. And for me, that's actually been a very important component of my recent weight loss progression and movement. So interestingly enough, this is so totally different from the sales comp stuff, but I've actually lost 133 pounds
oh,
since,
congratulations.
thank
Yeah.
you, since July 20th of last year. So just we're talking, 1 year, 2 days. And a lot of that for me was in the consciousness of and just paying attention, right, to what it was that I was doing, how I was feeling, what I was consuming. And that includes stress and includes anxiety, includes like all of the things that surround ourselves, and the consciousness of it being the biggest part. So like simply awareness is a is probably the true takeaway of that.
Awesome. Okay. Question I ask everybody as we wrap up this episode. What does success mean for you?
Mm. It means like probably constantly being uncomfortable.
Oh, okay.
And
Okay.
the reason I say that is because I feel like the reality of development and growth is putting yourself in situations where you don't know how to do those things. And it in at times is like super scary, and feeling of like inadequacy is like a normal thing. And I go between the I know this stuff to like I don't know what the hell I'm doing. And it's a back and forth, like it's a a seesaw type of thing, right? But what I think is the reality of any of our sort of progression into what is success, it means that we have to put ourselves enough out there, like constantly, to grow and evolve. And so I truly think that success is almost like this constant foray into discomfort, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is probably the telltale sign of how I'm doing something right, because I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know exactly how to get better at this, and part of that is just what comes with growth.
I agree wholeheartedly because I talk about that in my book, Being Super, that part of getting that call on the hero's journey is getting called out of your comfort zone to go on the quest. And so that comfort zone is not helpful. It's not like it's a place
Mm-hmm.
of rest, but it's also a place of complacency.
Right.
So got to get out of that comfort zone. I love it. Thank you, Christopher, so much. It's been nice having this conversation. I look forward to keeping up with you. Where's the book available?
So it is on Amazon. You can get the Kindle or paperback, and it's that Starting Simple Sales Compensation, and there is going to be more coming. So this will actually be the first in the series, and so we'll have the companion workbook, but we'll also be adding some additional books that will help small organizations across the board in terms of other aspects of compensation as well. So gonna build on this. There'll be more coming.
Absolutely. Fantastic. And I'll include that link. If I have it, I'll get the link from you to put into the show notes as well. Yeah. And so thanks so much, Christopher, for being a part of this show.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Been a pleasure.
So what did you get out of that? I know for me, I love the generation of even new ideas through a conversation that we can have on this show. I think it's going to be fantastic for everybody to, learn more about the nuances of developing sales compensation. Christopher can help with that. I also love getting to know him a little bit more. His personality structure, I can already guess what it is. And I think I might be right by me doing personality assessments with my business for my clients. I can guess. And I think I would be right. And I love those kind of people who love people so much, but they're also very detailed. And that is like, if you were doing a DISC assessment in 4 columns, they're on one side of that sheet, the 2 columns on this side, who are great with people. And because they love the details so much, they're curious. Like, they're not, those people that have a really solid mix of that tend to be just high curiosity. They don't already know all the answers, and they don't have to wait for all the detail to make a decision, but they're so curious about that next stage. And I think that's one of the things about Christopher that makes him so good at what he is doing. So I hope that you guys connect with him. I highly would recommend getting to know him more, connect on his channels, get the book, all of that good stuff. If you are in that place of needing some help with your sales team, your sales compensation, feel free to reach out. Make no mistake, even though I have this show, I don't always take on new clients in areas that I'm not good at. I that's not me. However, I'm pretty well connected. So if I can also be a resource by having a new guest on, connect with that guest that you feel could help you. They're ready and willing to do so. So also take a moment for yourself to, what's the best piece of advice you've received? Has it been something on one of these shows? I would love to hear that. I would love to hear what your version of success is. So, because that's what we want to do, is share advice, best practices, and what success really means for all of us. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Small Business Success Talk. Please subscribe, hit the little bell, get the notifications of when new episodes drop. That way you'll get to hear more of all of the things here on Small Business Success Talk. I am your host, Christy Smallwood. It's been a great time to get to know my guests, and thank you for being a part of that.